The EOS system has three more sets of palettes that can be used in the system: beam, intensity, and colors. These are fairly straightforward as to what they do. Intensity palettes, they remember the brightness of a light. Beam palettes, they remember the form and image settings of a light, meaning their zoom, edge, gobos, and animations. And color palettes remember the hue and saturation of a light. So let's step through these one by one. Intensity palettes are a feature that I don't think you'll use terribly often, but it's wise to know that they exist. These are accessed using the Intensity Palette button or Alt-I or Option-I on your keyboard. And they can be recorded or updated just like focus palettes. I've used these in situations in which the sun is a variable. So like an outdoor Shakespeare festival, they might need all the intensities for Act 1 super bright to compete with the sun during the months of June and July, but by the time we get to August, the sun goes down a little bit earlier. So here I might use intensity palettes so that we could quickly update the full bright and half bright and quarter bright intensities, and the whole show would be changed. As with other palettes, you can pull a portion of a palette or the entire thing. Okay, so for example, if I press 1 through 1000, grabbing like all of the channels, and I type intensity palette, so Alt-I or Option-I, to enter, EOS will turn on only groups 1, 11, 31, and 41, so ignoring these groups down here. Because those are the only groups with intensities applied in this palette. Every other light is ignored. Get it? Okay, that's pretty simple. Let's skip ahead. Beam palettes are a bit more complicated. You can use one using the Beam Palette button or Option or Alt-B on your keyboard. Anything under the form or image sections of the EOS ML display are stored here. Groups 51 and 61 would be a good showcase for this feature. So let's start by turning them on and setting them to Focus Palette 10. So group 51 and group 61, remember they have to hit the group second time, at full enter. Okay, so they're all on. This series of keystrokes assumes that you want the focus palette to the same groups of lights that you just used. So we're just going to also do focus palette 10, enter. So just assumed groups 51 and 61. Okay, I look at this and would say that all the beam sizes are quite small. So let's utilize beam palette number 2 on half the lights by pressing group 51, Option B or Alt B for beam palette 2, enter. The zoom settings on these lights coming from stage right or coming from your left will now expand to make a nice wash rather than the small beams of group 61. So this is a good comparison. Let's use these beam palettes to showcase a couple of other features that we haven't discussed yet. If you double tap the beam palette button, so I'm going to press beam palette, or Option BB, you'll see that palettes here are 1, 2, 3, and 4, each without a label. But we can do that by typing beam palette 1, enter. So now we've selected beam palette 1 down here in the bottom left-hand corner. So we're in blind mode. Because this is selected, augmented will show you what that actually looks like. It'll give you a preview, and this only happens in blind mode. So that's kind of neat. And then we could always give these labels. So we could preview beam palettes 2, 3, 4 by typing in beam palette 2. So the beam palette 1 was a small beam. Beam palette 2, enter. It's going to be kind of a medium beam. Beam palette 3, large. And beam palette 4 is maximum. So we can label these. So I'm going to say beam palette 1, label small. Beam palette 2, label, oops. Beam palette 2, label medium. Oops. Beam palette 3, label large. And beam palette 4, label max. All right, so you can try ahead and try that on your own. Okay, In this mode, I could also edit existing palettes and create new palettes. So let's try to type beam palette 5, enter. So this is a brand new beam palette. And let's create a gobo look with channels 601 through 606. But if I were to start typing 601, EOS is going to assume that I mean beam palette 601 because I'm in the beam palette list display. To actually edit the beam palette, I can either hit the edit soft key, or I can just go to the blind mode tab display. So I'm going to come down here and hit the edit button. Okay. Now that we're in the blind table display, we can select 601 through 606 and hit enter. We can't see an intensity here because this is a beam palette, but we'll see the light once we've adjusted one of the parameters under the focus or image sections of the ML display. So let's scroll over and pick out a gobo for our lights. You can pick anything fun, maybe something like a rotation or something like this. There we go. Now we can see the lights on, and we can make adjustments. Here's mine. Since we're working in blind mode, all of these adjustments are immediately saved, so there's no need to record or update. Now, if you were to return to live mode, you could access this palette. So if I were to take up group 601 at full, and now I could set the lights to be option B, or beam palette 5. It's going to adopt those gobos automatically. They'll be focused on center stage. So now we would see the form and image settings that we just used, retained, and the intensity and focus settings are used manually, not inside the beam palette. Okay, that's a lot. Let's go to color palettes. Color palettes are a bit more common. They can be used with the color palette button on your keyboard or Alt-C on your computer keyboard. And they do exactly what you think they would do. They retain all the color section settings from the ML display. With intelligent lights, color can actually be a little bit more difficult. I'd say it's really easy to change, but that's not always a good thing. With like 1 million plus options, sometimes people feel a little like paralyzed by the choices, and they waste a lot of time exploring the nuance of every single color for every single cue. As a designer, I think it's better to think about what you want to do even before you start working on your programming. So choosing color palettes ahead of time is a great way to accomplish this. This could be colors that are common across the production, such as like hot musical pink, where all the lights share the same pink, or it could be like a whole color scheme, or looks such as like a nighttime blue, where different systems have different shades of blue, green, purple. Let's talk about both options. Okay, let's start with a single color. This would be common with a full stage wash. So let's take group 60, which is going to be group 51, group 61, and the lights in between. We're going to take that at full, and we're going to set it to focus palette. Focus palette 99, group 60, focus palette 99, and then we're going to set it to beam palette 2. So it's going to create a nice down light wash. I can now use my color picker to change colors, or maybe even better, in the color picker tab, there's a bunch of gel colors from various brands. These are actually built-in color palettes. For example, picking R02 Roscoe 20, or sorry, R024 or Roscoe 24 will be the same orange across the board from one LED to another, and from a conventional light using that gel color as well. Well, mostly, it's not perfect. So rather than dragging the color picker around and finding the same orange in every single cue, you can just select R024. Kind of nice. You should try it out. And then let's record this as Q2. If you look in the live table display, you'll even see that the channels retain the gel color name, which is kind of awesome. Okay, but what if all the dancers came in with their costumes and you said, shoot, that's a little bit too red. I wish it was a little bit more amber. Well, we would have to make that adjustment to all the cues, but we can't update R024. So the better way would be instead to create a true color palette. So let's start by creating one with Q2 still up and R024 selected. Let's record this as color palette 1, or record color palette Alt or Option C1, and let's label this as Cabaret Red. Enter. And once again, you'll notice that your color values in the live table display have adopted your new label for your color palette. Okay, let's re-record this and update cue number 2. Now, let's go into the color palette list by double tapping the button color palette, or option CC. Now we're in our color palette list. Now we can type in color palette 1, enter, or just 1 because it's going to assume color palette 1, enter. And once again, we can press the edit key down in the bottom soft keys area. Now we're going to select group 60, and you'll see that they're already on because they have colors applied. And let's change the color to be something a little bit more amber. So perhaps we could go to R021. This will automatically save your adjustment. You don't have to update or anything. Okay, let's go back to live mode. And you'll notice that the color is still a deep red. Again, we don't want actions in blind mode to adjust what's happening on the live stage. Therefore, to adopt these changes, to see these changes, you'll either need to go back and then forward in your cue. So I'm going to go backwards and forwards, oops, back to cue 2. Now we'll see the color palette 1 applied. Color palettes can also hold more complex looks. They don't have to contain just a single color. Let's illustrate this by taking group 60 out. And now we're going to bring up groups 51 and 61 to full. And we're going to set them to focus palette 10 and beam palette 3. This is going to create a nice wash from 2 high sides. We can now set the color of the lights coming from stage right to be different than the lights colors coming from stage left. It would help a little bit if we had some figures on stage, and we can do that. So we're going to take channels 101 or 1001 through 1004 at full. Boom! We've got our people. How cool is that? Okay, we're going to record this as 3 for now. Now let's create this into a night look. So I'm going to grab group 51, and I'm going to set this to be some sort of deep blue, and you can choose your own color here. That'll work. And then let's grab group 61 and let's make that to be some sort of like aqua blue. Okay, there we go. And then we're going to record this as color palette 2 with a label of night look. All right, great. Let's go ahead and update or re-record cue number 3. Now, your director comes in, looks at the cue, and wants to know why everyone is swimming in the ocean. Okay, we can tone down some of that aqua blue. The good news is that since you used the night look color palette for all your cues, so let's pretend that we have a cue 3, 4, 5, 6, and all of them are being used, you can just update the color palette and we'll be good to go. So let's take group 61. And let's set the color to be a little bit more lavender. Here I'm going to do R056, so a nice little lavender. There we go. Now that we've made this adjustment and the director's happy, we're going to update color palette 2, and I'm going to hit enter. Now, every single cue that utilizes this color scheme will be updated, and you just saved yourself hours of time. How cool is that?